Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, March 8th, 2018 meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I'm Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will now take roll. Director Debbie?
Here.
Director Welsh?
Here.
Director Hasai? Here. Vice President Natoli?
Here.
We will now take public comment on any items appearing on our closed session agenda. And seeing as there are none, we will adjourn to closed session and return at 7:30 p.m. for our regular meeting. Good evening. Welcome to the March 8th, 2018 meeting of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I'm Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will now take roll. Director Debbie?
Here.
Director Welsh?
Here.
Director Hasai?
Here.
And Vice President Natoli.
Here.
The board is just returning from closed session. On item 3A, existing litigation, no action was taken. The board voted 5-0 because a threat of litigation came to the district since the posting of the existing agenda, and we agreed that we will publish the threat of litigation within the next 24 hours. We gave a direction to our attorneys on the matter. On item 3B, we gave direction to our labor negotiators. We will now take public comments on items not appearing on the agenda.
And unfortunately, tonight there are no comment cards, so you do not have to fill out one today because we don't have them.
So that means no comments.
No.
Does that mean I can't speak? David Bergen. I would like to discuss or have the board discuss the March 17th meeting with Matrix. I understand that thus far it's not going to be recorded, and I think it really should be. There's many people who cannot attend, including myself. It's St. Patrick's Day. And yes, I have this great party I'm going to. But I think it's important that those members of the public who cannot attend be able to view it or listen to it, and I believe the board is responsible for making that possible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mari Metcalf. I am looking at the complaint filed by Fadi Saba, and I have a question regarding page 10. It says that on information and belief, Ramos was investigated for improperly accessing DMV records of Kensington District board members and others. So my questions about that are, is the investigation concluded? Has it concluded, or is it ongoing?
We would refer that matter to our attorney.
And unfortunately, we can't comment on pending litigation.
Okay, I'm asking not about the pending litigation. I'm asking about the investigation that was done regarding Ramos and whoever else in the department using CLETS to access records of district board members and other residents.
Frankly, that's just an allegation in the complaint. There's no specificity as to exactly what search was done, and more importantly, when it was done.
So are you denying that there was an investigation that was done regarding the members of the Kensington Police Department looking up individuals on the CLET system? Are you denying that?
No, there may have been. I'm saying I can't speak to whatever incident that the plaintiff is referencing. Of course. I'm saying that I can't speak to whatever incident the plaintiff means because he is not specific.
I'm not talking about an incident. I'm talking about an investigation
Yes.
that was done
When?
Are you denying that that
When was the
investigation was
investigation?
done?
When was the
I
investigation?
asked you, that was my initial question.
I
Has the
can't speak
investigation
to it.
concluded?
I
Can we
don't-
not talk over each other? You asked me a question, I'm answering you. My question is, when was the investigation concluded?
You speak of the investigation as if I know what investigation you're talking about, and I do not.
Okay, I'm speaking in plain English, and I am talking about an investigation of the Kensington Police Department police using the CLET system in a way that is not authorized, and they used it to look up board members' information and possibly other people's information.
Do you know for a fact that there was one or more such investigations? Is that what you're saying?
I'm asking you about that investigation.
So I can tell you that in my time here, there has been no such investigation. Therefore, there may have been one, there may have been more. I can't answer questions about a specific investigation without knowing more information.
Okay, well, that was more of a straight answer. So who, if you don't know the answer to the question, who then knows the answer to the question about the investigation?
I can't speak to that. I could only look to the files, and unfortunately, I would not be able to reveal much about prior investigations. However, I can tell you, if this is helpful, that there was an investigation done, and unusually, there was actually a report that was partially published, and you may find some information about that in that published report.
Okay, so I'm now confused because a second ago you said that you didn't know that one was done, and now the next sentence was that you did know that one was done.
I know that there was a reference to unauthorized use of cleats in this investigator's report. Frankly, I have not committed the report to memory. I do know that it was published, and therefore that is a resource you might try
Okay, and it was published where?
on the website.
Okay, and was the investigation performed by an outside agency?
Yes.
So it was not an internal
That
investigation only?
particular one was done by an outside investigator, yes.
Outside investigator. Okay, and so how would we get access to the report?
It's on the website. I don't recall the exact URL, but it is there under press releases, I believe.
Okay, so, a second ago, maybe I'm not following you. So a second ago, you said that there was an excerpt that was published, but I'm asking for the entire report.
That you cannot have.
Oh, okay.
They're exempt
So
from disclosure.
you've determined that it's not going to be
No, I do not.
exposed to the public?
The Police Officers' Bill of Rights basically precludes the disclosure of many documents relating to IAs.
Okay, well, we can have that
in this-
argument.
in
So
the-
you're saying that any residents who want to know whether they were subjected to CLET searches that were unlawful would have to sue in order to get access to that report. That's what I hear you saying.
I can't speak to that.
If a resident was concerned, they are certainly welcome to file a complaint. However, internal affairs investigations are private unless released by the board.
Well, I don't know whether this was an internal affairs investigation or not. I'm trying to obtain information about that, and I'm getting kind of stonewalled. So
Perhaps you
if
should
it
ask
was an
the
internal,
CSD website is the investigation to which Ms. Danforth is referring.
No, I think we've gotten your comment, so thank you. We're not here to have a dialogue, we're here to take comments, and you,
okay, but you didn't answer my question, because my question is, how do residents...
it's not our obligation to answer your
Can you not
question.
talk over me? I'm sorry. When I was on the board, I tried not to talk over people. So my question is, what procedure do residents like me have to go through to get access to the full document? And
Can I
I have
suggest-
not really gotten an answer.
Can I suggest that you send us a written request and we'll consider replying?
Okay, great, thanks.
And now for something completely different. Would you mind passing this out, Chris? I'd like to thank everybody for letting me talk tonight. I have two quick matters to talk about. They're related. I'm here to ask you to do two things. First of all, to agree that the fundraising effort for this building is going to take several years rather than several months. I know that seems trivial, but I will explain why that's important. And the second is to ask you to agree to a financing plan including a loan if necessary, to bridge the construction costs until the community fundraising effort is realized. This should be a no-brainer, but I need to explain that as the board has asked members of the community, notably the K groups, to try to organize a fundraising effort for the community.
Actually, that was an offer that was made as opposed to a request, just to be clear.
Sorry, Sylvia, thank you. And Sylvia has been an integral part of the meetings for this, and so we're really happy to have her on board. And she has been a really great leader so far. In our discussions in this board, which I'm not saying I represent the board, or the group, I'm there because I'm on the KPOA board and all the K groups are trying to be represented. And some people on that fundraising group have said, well, we don't actually know what the timetable is for raising money. Some people are under the impression that there's a push to raise money within several months. And I think that everyone would understand that's unrealistic. Could I please have a verbal commitment that, look, this is going to take a couple of years, because we want to go back to the same people a couple of times. We want to give people the opportunity to pay over installments, and we want to get this done right. Is that okay?
Well, we can't, it's not on our agenda, so we cannot make a public comment, but this is certainly
therefore,
items that have been under consideration by both the Finance Committee and the board at large in our thought process, but we would need to agendize for a formal commitment, and this is being, directed by Sylvia as coordinator.
Great. So I'd like to ask, because I was disappointed that it was not on the agenda tonight, I'd like to ask you to put it on next month's agenda, in addition to an agenda item that considers how you will deal with whatever money will be shortfall. This is not, my affair on the finances. I don't know this. I don't know how much money you have up front. I don't know what will be required. But since you don't have a contract, you don't even know what design you're going to take. And I think that the fundraising group can work with that, but it helps if we understand that whatever design you choose, that we can get enough time to try to raise those funds, and while that effort is going on, that the board will agree to take a loan if necessary to do it. Does that make sense?
Can I just say that the community fundraising efforts have always been supplemental, and that's wonderful, and we can talk more about this offline, but it's always been supplemental to the whole, to everything. It's never been a requirement.
No, I understand, but so the $350,000 target that's being requested, or if not requested, solicited, or if not requested, offered, is this going to help or not, or would it make a difference if that group raises numbers?
I'll refer, there's a meeting that I went over a lot of these numbers sometime earlier this year. I'll find the exact meeting and I will send you the notes from there, because I went over the numbers and the timetable pretty carefully.
Okay, so is the board prepared, if necessary, to take out a loan if necessary?
That's not up for discussion tonight. We can't talk about that.
No, I'm saying, but can that be agendized?
It could be agendized anytime.
Okay, so that's my request.
We'll agendize it at the proper time.
Thank you.
Mark Costantini, Kensington resident, terrible public speaker. In this recent Outlook, Director Natoli writes in her piece here on how hard it is to hire police officers, that all these approaches, the hiring process is both time-consuming and costly because candidates must have a background report and psychological evaluation, pardon me. One would think that the same standards that are applied to entry-level officers, entry-level candidates, should be at least the same as applied to a chief of police candidate, interim or otherwise, regardless if they're hired from outside or promoted from inside the department. So this is a simple yes or no question, not about the law surrounding it. Did interim Chief Hall undergo the same background check and psychological evaluation in the course of the board's promotion of him to interim chief of police that Natoli talks about in the Outlook? Yes or no?
I would decline to answer that question.
Okay.
Where I come from, that's a no.
Dave Spath.
Actually, let me clarify. This is public comment time. It's not question and answer. We are not, technically, the board does not comment on items that the public comments on because they're not agendized.
I'd just like to support David Bergen's comments. I think it's very important that the March 17th presentation by Matrix Consulting Group be recorded, video recording, and made available to the public on the district website. There's probably not going to be a large contingent relative to the population of Kensington at the meeting, so it's important that all residents have the opportunity to see what was presented, the discussion, and what is expected going forward. So I would hope that you would consider that or reconsider it if you've already made a decision as to not recording it. So thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Carl Kruger. The financial statements are no longer on a consent calendar. So where is the time to talk about financial statements? Right now? Good. I'm like the dog addict who needs his dog. I need to talk about financial issues every so often. There's some concern about where we are financially. And I spent some time with our latest statement, which was, I think, ending at the end of January. So I have a few comments, and then I have a question or two.
It ends in February. It's the latest.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. The last one that came out. So our income is good, as it has been for 2, 3, or 4 years. So we don't really have an issue on income. Even so, I didn't understand why West County was so slow in reimbursing us for items that they should reimburse us for. But that's not a key point. I looked at police salaries and so on, and they, as a total, are about $5,000 above budget, but mainly because of the buyout of officers who have left. When you take overtime and regular time, we're under budget. And it probably should be with the low staffing that we have. And what that also does, it puts vehicle operation and training and under budget. I don't understand why recruiting is under budget, because this seems to me the time where we spend money on recruiting. Legal fees, as always, on the police side are high, but on the district side, they are slightly low. And then we had some items that we budgeted very, very high, like most of the operational things that we have not done. And I wonder if we are on schedule with billing on the things that have been done and committed to, or if we are not on schedule on billings, because we are more than $100,000 below budget. So have we paid and have we been billed for everything that has been done up to now? Is it basically only the architect? That's what it is. So, okay. And are we okay on legal fees and billing? Are we still way behind on billings? We are okay? We are up to date? Okay. So I guess that's it. I got my fix. Thank you.
Hey, Stephen Stilk. I think this was a good example of why the budget document should go on the consent calendar where it can be discussed. Because if you have it on public comment, no questions can be asked, no answers can be given unless you break the rule and selectively decide to answer some people's questions but not others. So I think the budget, the unaudited profits and loss should go back on the consent calendar. And I want you to think about that.
Any further comments? No. Board comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to the issue that's been raised by a couple people about recording the event coming up, the community meeting that is going to be conducted by Matrix. I originally thought we should record it, and I actually spoke personally with Richard Brady, who's going to be conducting that session. And he raised a couple of convincing points, what to me were convincing points about that. Number one, he was afraid of chilling participation. Some people don't like to speak up when they know they're being recorded. And he based this, I've seen this myself. I have over 25 years of experience doing advisory committee meetings for Cal OSHA. And I have noticed that when we recorded those meetings, we got much less participation. So what he's really trying to get, and I think he's being honest about this, he's really trying to dig into the community and get input that has not been gotten so far, not the usual folks who attend these meetings and speak, but those who've never spoken before. And he also said that he is going to be extra careful in recording comments and responses to comments and that kind of thing, so there will be a clear record of what took place in that meeting. And I kind of, my feeling is we should leave it up to his judgment. He's done this a lot. He's got an incredibly good reputation for helping police districts figure out what they want to do with their issues. Good track record in Berkeley, as a matter of fact, just a few years ago. So I personally feel like we should go with his judgment on this. There will be a second meeting. We can always see what happened at the first meeting, and if there seems to be an indication that we should change, or we should talk to him about changing, we can do that. So that's my personal feeling on it.
Other board comments?
I also raised this with him, and in addition to the points that Len has raised, this is going to be very conversational, potentially some small group work. So if folks are imagining kind of a presentation type meeting, it's not going to be like that. And for the same reasons he articulated to Len, he articulated to me similar rationale. This is a meeting on March 17th. It is publicized on Nextdoor. It is in the paper, and it is also posted on the signboard about the Matrix Consulting Group, which has been hired to help us examine the police department to look at what kind of improvements and investments we would need to make in our own department and what possible strategies there may be to deliver services. They're having a community input meeting on March 17th here at 10 a.m., pastries and coffee at 9:30, and I am telling everybody I meet, wherever I meet them, to please try to come. It's very important that folks participate in the process.
If I could just add one thing to that. There are going to be two meetings, at least two meetings are planned for right now. This March meeting is for them to hear from the community as much as they can get input about what kind of policing the community would like to get. The April meeting is for them, having taken in this information and done their own research on state-of-the-art policing, for them to start making recommendations about the kinds of services they think this community should get from the police, whether we contract out or keep our own police force.
And we'll be looking for other avenues that the community can comment and give information to Matrix. I want to alert the community we have two finance committee meetings coming up this month. The first is Monday, March 12th, 10 a.m. here in this building. At that point, we're simply examining new budget documents and changes to how we present our financial information to the board and to the community. And then on Wednesday, March 28th, 7 p.m. will be our more regular meeting. At that point, we hope to have our auditor, Stephen Chang of La Marina and Chang, come and speak to our yearly audit, and also to give a first draft presentation of our 2018-19 budget. I can't believe it's going to be 2018-19. Anyway, so please mark those on your calendar, and we look forward to seeing you. We have, unfortunately, Director Welsh needs to leave a little bit early this evening. So at this point, I'm sorry, are there staff comments before I move on to the next item? We're going to, but because if there's anything else, I didn't want to speak over you. Okay. We're going to move the items 9A and B to this point in the evening so that Director Welsh can participate in the discussion. So you will find those items in the agenda beginning on page 25, and I'll ask Vice President Natoli to present 9A.
I don't know if there are any comments on, public comments on 9A. It's a pretty straightforward issue that we just want to clean up the agreement that we have with Bayview and remove those items that came about because the consultant does a lot of contracts with garbage companies, and some of these are standard language and some of these other contracts that they've done, but they're not applicable to Bayview. So if there are no comments on that, we can go. I would have been surprised if you didn't have a comment.
I've been doing my homework. A. Stephen Still. Schedule D requires information to be provided for each month on a quarterly basis. However, Bayview still does not provide all of the required information. Simply requiring even less is not the best way to manage the $1.3 million solid waste contract. Item A on your list under tonnage states this is for tonnage by customer type. It should read by material type. I think that's the one change you should make. You didn't have that thing but it's not by customer type. All right, it refers to garbage, recyclables, and yard waste. So if we move on then down the line to B, which is the one that you scratched out here. Sorry, getting unorganized. B is the one you deleted completely. The most recent report is the only one that I have seen that provides any information about this, the disposal of recyclable materials. And it shows that commingled recyclables were actually sold to Republic. This item is relevant and it should not be deleted. At present, Republic no longer buys clean yard debris. However, I see no reason to delete the item. This is number C, letter C. Bayview simply can state on the next green waste entry report that it received no income, rather than delete the whole thing. Moving down to number 2, which is customer reports under B. I am confused which services are not relevant to Kensington. There is reference to pulls, P-U-L-L-S, but I think that means pickups and collections and not the law enforcement term trash pull, which means to go through somebody's garbage looking for evidence. Bayview provides Bayview provides cubic yard dumpsters and large drop boxes for special jobs. They are listed in this section. Therefore, I think the section is relevant. Bayview is now reporting the number and size of containers used by regular customers. Those for multi-unit apartments are suspect. For example, there is an 8-unit apartment building across from the pub. Bayview lists that it has 8 cans, which is the exact minimum requirement by law, when in fact they use a dumpster. Actual data on reports would be better than alternative numbers. Several people have asked how much of Kensington's garbage is from restaurants. The district should find out because of the new state laws regarding commercial food recycling. In summary, I don't think the deletion is a good idea. Moving on to 5, revenue report, and this I think is an important one. Section B is for listing customers whose service has been cut off due to non-payment. Director Natoli was told by HF&H Consultants that this is standard for agencies that assist contractors in collecting payments, which isn't the case in Kensington, granted. However, it can serve another purpose, this list. That is determining if a resident may be posing health risks by discontinuing garbage service, which raises the question, are Kensington residents required to subscribe to Bayview Refuge and Recycling Service, or can they self-haul their garbage and their recyclables? There were actually 9 of those listed for the last report. The strange things, it was noted they were only for the Wednesday route. I don't understand what that means. This report should be required, not deleted. In fact, the district should follow through, determine if the house is occupied, and if it is no longer subscribing to garbage service, which I believe is required under state law, but probably not in all unincorporated areas. I know I'm taking longer than I'm supposed to. Under annual reports number 3, as I stated, recyclables are currently marketed, and Bayview can get useful information from Republic on market conditions. This item should not be deleted because the district is supposed to assess the sustainability of its recycling program, and with no information, how can you make a determination? Finally, in the main body of the agreement, there are stipulations regarding disposal of recyclable and organic materials. For recyclables, the residual amount, that is, the amount taken to landfill, must be less than 10%, according to our contract. However, I have learned that our material is manually sorted along with everybody else's, and 10 to 15% of recyclables ends up in garbage, landfill, all right? The agreement also specifies that our yard waste should have less than 1% residual, but Republic takes 10 to 15% of its organic material to landfill. We, of course, can do nothing about this, but public awareness may make Republic better at running its operations. I would not delete any of these requirements from the reports. I would require Bayview to fill them in.
Thank you.
Because Bayview is not in charge of the organic facility or the recyclable facility, I don't think that those requirements are appropriate to keep on. With respect to those who are delinquent in their account, my understanding is you have to have a permit from the county in order to not use Bayview services. And I don't know what is involved in having a permit from the county. but you need a permit if you're not going to use Bayview services. With respect to some of this information on customer type, I think that the form that the county requires Bayview to fill out, which is Exhibit B to the Memorandum of Understanding, Bayview does fill that out on a monthly basis, and I think that that's a sufficient amount of information. Pardon me? Okay, sorry. What Delk was saying was that the Exhibit B that goes to the county is filled out quarterly, not monthly, like I had said. But it provides the information. We're a small community. Our organics and our recyclables, as Delk mentioned, are commingled with others. And so the numbers that come out of those facilities are not relevant to Kensington specific. And so that's one of the reasons why, since they don't have access to that information directly, when I talked to HH&F, they recommended or agreed that these could be deleted.
Bayview does have specific information on how much recyclables from Kensington are taken to the recycling facility and how much yard waste is taken to the composting facility. What it doesn't have is what the end product is, and as I say, we can't do anything about it.
That's right, that's correct. They know how many tons they give to the compost facility and how many tons go to the recycle facility. Director Welsh, do you have any further comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have as much information posted as you possibly can, and we should remember, I think, that this was a standard form contract that HF&H had us begin with. The whole point of that negotiation was to use a more modern approach to contracting with solid waste collectors. But we didn't parse every single line in that contract, and Linda Lipscomb and I negotiated that contract with Bayview. And we actually never considered those issues. And I know that Tracy Swanborn, who helped us with that process, kind of acknowledged it was a standard form contract, and some of those provisions might not be appropriate for our community. So I think if these things ever become an issue and somebody wants to do a study on it, or somebody wants to say we should amend our contract to take certain steps, these kinds of information can be requested from Bayview. I've always found them to be accommodating. Whenever we want to know something, if they have the information, they'll provide it. But to simply just make them provide it because that's what the contract says, I don't think that serves, much of a good purpose. And, they should be focusing on servicing us, and they provide, as far as I can tell, stellar, excellent service. So I'm inclined to go with these changes just to make it clear what they really should be doing to serve us and what is not really necessary.
And I think because we're not going to be pursuing, I thought about the health risk as well on item 5B, but I think, unfortunately, we're not going to be pursuing remittance of any kind of garbage, and that, unfortunately, it sort of seems like a mechanism for shaming your neighbors.
Well, yeah, that's another point. They're actually asking for a list of people's names that are delinquent, and, I'm not sure, for example, if we got a Public Records Act request, we'd want to release those names. So it's giving us, an administrative burden to keep track of that. If there is a problem, if somebody notices garbage is piling up somewhere, that information can be brought to us, and we can work with the county and with Bayview as appropriate to deal with that if such a situation arises.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'd want to be alerted first for the police to check, to do a welfare check.
Yes.
Would you like to make a motion? Any other board comment or?
I'd like to move that we adopt the amendment to Exhibit D.
I'll second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 5-0.
And no, anybody opposed?
Oh, I'm sorry, noes.
Be clear.
Sorry. I thought
Nobody's opposed,
I
okay.
thought I heard everyone.
Just wanted to be
but
clear.
I should make sure that, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, we're moving on to item 9B.
Yeah, 9B is about food composting, and I became concerned as I heard a lot of reports on the news that China and other Asian countries are not taking our recyclables as they used to. And there have been shipments that have gone to Asia that have been rejected and brought back. I'm aware that California is very interested in reducing material going to landfills, the diversion requirements. I myself compost, so I am not interested directly in having food composting as part of our service, but what I am concerned about is the district possibly having higher future cost for composting as California tightens down on the diversion requirements. The estimates from EPA in California are about 18 to 21% of our garbage is food waste. And so by having food waste be picked up with green waste, we could be furthering meeting diversion goals. In addition, a slight benefit to Kensington is food waste would have to be picked up once a week, and I know I myself sometimes have 11 containers, it's not unusual, of green waste waiting 3 weeks until the green waste is picked up. So green waste would be picked up weekly. This would, because of the extra service, come with a cost increase of about 7%. And with the 3% annual increase, this would represent a 10% increase if the service were to begin next January, which I realize is an increase.
10% increase in the fee?
Pardon me?
10% increase in what?
A 10% increase over the monthly rates.
There you go. Okay.
So on page 42, I've done a comparison of the our current cost, El Cerrito's current cost, and Albany's current cost. Albany's figures are 2017. They do their cost increase a little bit later in the year, so we don't have those. And then what the proposed rates would be with a 10% increase. Also, Bayview would provide each resident with 1 to 2 green waste containers with wheels, as well as a recyclable container with wheels for this service. So just to give you an idea, 21% of residents have a 20-gallon monthly service, which right now costs $41.65. The proposed rate would go up to $45.70. The 71% of our residents use the 30 to 35 gallon, which I actually think is 32 gallons that's used. That would be $45.65 a month. That would go up to $50.22. But it is significant that Albany and El Cerrito charge extra for more than one green waste container. And we would have basically the continued unlimited green waste under this new service. So, anyway, any comments?
Well, wasn't there a proposal to do a survey, or is that coming later?
Yes, we want to do a survey, and the May invoice with Bayview will have the survey. I'm not sure how we'll do the survey as yet, if it'll be something like Survey Monkey, or have something that you could mail back to Bayview, or flash vote or something else, but anyway.
So if I just add a couple things real quick before you comment. So last time around when we entered into the contract, there was a question, people raised the question, do we want, actually I think this issue came up then, and also the issue of backyard service, and we had HF&H do a survey which got a very good response rate, and it seemed to settle the question pretty handily back then about what people wanted. So we thought a few years later now, the food waste thing has become much more of an issue environmentally and politically for the state, and perhaps for the whole country now. So why don't we go back and do a survey to see if people are willing to pay the 10% fee increase for this extra service? So the point is, we don't want to push this unless the people want us to, so we want to do a survey, an effective one, to find out what people want.
But can we also understand a little bit better the diversion? It's going to become a requirement, correct?
Increased diversion rates are going to be coming down the pike, yes.
Do you know what years or?
No, it's uncertain. They're doing the regulations right now. But the issue is, if we cannot count our recyclables as meeting the diversion goals, the only other way to meet the diversion goals will be through organics. And the concern, and the reason I'm bringing it up now, is because Republic, our composting facility, has told us that they could grandfather us in now, but they can't guarantee grandfathering us in the future, because as other communities need to go to composting, that's going to take their capacity, and if we can't lock ourselves into their capacity now, that means we'll have to go to some facility further away, which will increase the cost well beyond the 10%. That's the concern that I have.
Yeah, and I'm glad you raised that issue, Sylvia, because there is a statute that was signed into law, I think it was last year, that actually mandates that we take this kind of action given our current diversion rates. It takes a regulation to implement that statutory requirement. That regulatory process has been underway for about a year. Tracy Swanborn, the HF&H consultant, has been following this. And I think the statute says the requirements have to be in place by 2021 or so. But it could be sooner if the regulatory process produces an enforceable regulation. It's up to how soon that process happens. The latest it can happen is by the statutory deadline. So there is some time pressure to get this done, and as Eileen pointed out, we have an opportunity now to get it done at what will probably be a much cheaper cost than if we wait a couple of years.
I'm Randy Weiss. I just want to say that I don't believe, I'm sorry, I'm Randy Weiss, and I do not believe that Bayview will curtail its expenses, because it's like we just went over this a year and a half ago. And my garbage rates went up enormously because I'm a senior and I'm one of the persons who has a small can. And now I feel like I'm being forced into doing something that I personally don't want to do. And I will be honest with you, I will not do it and I will not pay. It's that simple for me. I'm being priced out of this area. I'm a widow. I've lost some of my income. I can't afford to live here anymore. And Bayview, in my opinion, their rates have gone up enormously. And when you look at what you did, and thank you so much for doing this, why can't we, as a community, opt to, if people want to do it, opt to what Albany and El Cerrito are doing? And if they have more compost, let them pay extra. Why should I have to pay for something that I'm not even going to use? Or if I want to use it, I can keep it to a minimum. I just don't think it's fair. I feel like I'm being forced into all these expenses that come with living in Kensington. And to be quite honest with you, I just don't see the benefits anymore. I really don't. And I don't understand why we can't opt in or opt out. The Bayview charges us by the cans. So the program is already established. I get a bill, you get a bill, you get a bill. Why can't they just add for those families that want to opt in at the moment? And if we choose to opt in, then we can do it. I just don't understand it. I really don't. And then the other thing is about permitting. If I am a resident, another thought I had is I'm going to try and put my garbage with a neighbor, and we'll pay for one service rather than individual housing. I mean, it's getting to be too expensive to live here. It really, and especially with the new tax laws that have been passed, I cannot afford to live here comfortably anymore, and I refuse to pay for this. I just won't do it. And if the police come or whatever comes, I'll talk to them, but I will get rid of my garbage, trust me, but I am not going to pay these fees. And I feel very, very strongly about it, as you can see. And I think it's unfair, and I don't understand why why we don't have more options. These other towns seem to have more options. Excuse me?
Well,
Yes.
we understand the cost with compost is, of course, in volume, and the difficulty is that compost must be collected weekly. Now, none of this is a done deal.
I understand
We're coming to discuss this evening, of course, about how we find out about and get community input.
Yeah, and actually, the purpose of the survey is precisely to get input from people like you about what you think we should do. You should know, though, the law is not going to give us a choice after a few years.
So in a few years, you know what? In a few years, I don't think I'm going to be living here because I don't think I'm going to be able to afford to live here. So I'm not really worried about a few years. In a few years, we may all be dead. Who knows? You know, I'm not looking, we just can't predict that. And Bayview continues to raise its prices. And if they say it's going to be 7%, does that mean it's going to be 7% every single year, just this one time?
No.
But then when the contract ends, the garbage rates go up, 3% every year? And how long is the contract?
Until 2023.
Until 2023.
Another 5 years. And then it will go up again and again and again. I mean, I don't know. Does anybody else have any comments? To me, it is just so upsetting. You have no idea. It's like...
No, we absolutely understand, and we appreciate your...
And how many people, what is the percentage of when you decide whether we opt in or opt out as a community? How many?
We're going to be doing some surveying and getting some results. We wouldn't think that this would be an issue that we would have to decide upon until the fall.
Yeah, so we'll get results from the survey. We'll publish the results. People can come comment on that information, and we'll make a decision then.
Yeah, I mean, does it...
Can someone repeat the?
A 218 hearing. We've been told by law that that does not have to occur.
It's not a 218 situation, but generally for any refuge rates, there is at least one public hearing for the public to give its opinion. But no, you don't take a formal vote.
You need to...
I just have one other question. In terms of if I opt out and do not use Bayview to collect my garbage, you said I would need a permit from the county. Is that in writing? Because I would like to see that.
Well, you could apply for a permit. I don't know that it's that difficult. I think they just want to make sure you have some way to get rid of your garbage that's legal. I think that's what the permit process is about.
We can look for that and get back to you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, off script. It's my understanding that garbage rates still have to go through part of the Proposition 218 procedure, the procedural part of it, but there doesn't have to be an election to decide on it. So that is correct. So the board would propose the rates. They would send a notice to every affected household 45 days in advance. There would be a hearing. If there wasn't 50% of the property owners come in with a written notice and say they didn't want this, then it could be passed. Is that correct?
I honestly can't verify that to the last detail. Before we started that process, I would check it very carefully because Prop 218 has a lot of detail in it, and I would...
We'll work out all that out before we try to make a decision.
Yeah, but you didn't do it before, at the last time.
I'm not sure that's true, but...
Well, I am. All right. I'm going to be a little bit off script here. But anyway, I was having a little trouble understanding why the price of recyclables in China was affecting food waste pickup here. But now I understand that possibility is we won't be able to count our recyclable stuff as diverted. All right, so then we're not going to be able to meet the guidelines. We are not going to be able to do it by putting every bit of food waste in compost bins, unless people go out and buy about 20 times more food than they're currently buying and put that in the recomposting thing and put absolutely nothing in their garbage bins that'll make it. All right, let me just get back and say one thing here. So let's assume that every resident decreases his garbage by 20%, by ardently placing food wraps and soil paper in the yard waste bin. That will increase our current recycling rate from 58% to 66%. Therefore, we would not be meeting that 75% recycling rate. But I spoke at a meeting a few months back, and I explained that recycling, the new recycling rate, encompasses source reduction, recycling of plastic, glass, paper, and recycling of green waste and food through composting. And their 75% number has a pounds per person per day is the goal that they're going after. We are already below that limit. So I don't think the big bag boogeyman is going to come after us about that. But let me just make...
Just say one thing, all we want to do tonight is, I think, is vote to go forward with the survey, right? So
And get some information, I hope.
Yeah,
Would you
so
like
that's-
some information? I'm giving you some information, Lynn, all right? So I'd like to say one other thing. So as Eileen pointed out, she had a meeting with Bayview, and they said that Republic had said that, let me get close to the quotes right here.
Well, actually, Republic directly told us,
All right,
with you present at our meeting in the fall,
Right.
that they could grandfather us in.
all right. And I think, all right, so let me just repeat that for those who didn't understand it. So if we act right away, we can get grandfathered in and be promised that we can put our food waste in our green garbage cans and have it taken to Republic for being composted. It's the same place that our green waste without food gets dumped in. It all gets dumped on the same pile. They don't have one pile for clean yard waste, which has no food in it, and another pile for the stuff that's really going to rot. They have one pile. But I think that Republic was doing a little bamboozling on us because, and so I wondered, what is the annual intake capacity at Republic's Richmond facility? Did that come up? Did they answer that? Do you recall?
I don't recall that they answered that, but I did talk to Tracy at HH&F about that, because I also thought, is he blowing smoke or not? And she did indicate that a number of number of jurisdictions are starting to go into the Republic compost facility in Richmond. And that, coupled with understanding that we are going to be under increasing diversion requirements, led me to think, even though it's not important to me, because I already compost, I just bought a second composter, I thought the district should be made aware of this and should consider whether they want to have food composting.
Okay, so you didn't find out what the capacity at the Richmond facility is. I know you
Yes, I
you want
think
to,
if you,
you want me to shut up?
Could I suggest,
No, I want to say one more thing, okay?
Well, I want to get much more information from you. I'm asking you to sort of send us something in writing for us. If you have questions, we can research them.
All right. Guess what? I found out what the capacity is at the Richmond Republic's composting facility. In 2016, it took in 125,000 tons of green waste, green organic waste. So our addition of approximately 250 tons per year would be the equivalent to an insignificant increase of 0.2%. 0.2% is how much we would be adding to Republic's pile. So again, I think you were bamboozled into thinking you better make this decision soon or you're never going to get another chance. We're just tiny, tiny little bit. I know a lot of people hate numbers, but numbers can tell you something.
Thank you.
Anthony Knight. I, not that long ago, attended two solid waste subcommittee meetings and also went on an on-site visit to Republic's facility. And at all three of those occasions, the participants were, meaning that the folks from Kensington, along with me, who were attending, were very enthusiastic about the idea of their food waste being picked up and disposed of in an environmentally sound way and not being dumped in landfill. Personally, I think this is a great idea, should be fully endorsed by just most everybody. I think that the financial aspect of it is minimal. My garbage bill is something like the $41 a month that was mentioned. I have a smaller can. So a 10% increase on $41 is $4 a month. I'm really happy to pay $4 a month for all my kitchen scraps and food waste to be picked up and disposed of. I'm also very happy with the idea that the green waste, meaning the garden waste, which overflows my bins because sometimes they have to wait 3 weeks for a pickup, could be picked up on a weekly basis. I think this is a wonderful proposal, speaking personally, but speaking to the point here, I think that the other residents of Kensington should be surveyed to weigh in on this. And if they feel like I do, and from these meetings, there certainly was that sentiment, then I think this would be, well, I think it's appropriate that they be asked, and I hope that it comes about.
All right, thank you. All right, I would like to make a motion that we direct Bayview to include a survey in the May invoice, and I'm happy to provide a prepaid envelope if that increases our response level. And I would like to also propose, well, let me first take a vote on
I'll
this.
second that.
All in favor? Or
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? All right, the motion passes 5-0. I'd like to make another motion that we direct HH&F, the consultant that did the RFP in 2014, and while I was not on the board at that time, I found them to be very professional. I think Len can speak to that, and aware of issues in refuse and recycling, that they prepare an online survey, although I'd like to work with them to determine the method of surveying. Currently, I'm exploring an option called Flash Vote. In addition to SurveyMonkey, we're looking for voting techniques that are more scientifically sound, let us say. So until that research is concluded and I presented it to the board, I'd be hesitant to determine a survey method. Yes.
I apologize, but could you restate the motion?
Absolutely. So I would make a motion that the board hires HH&F to prepare an online survey, possibly take calls from residents and tally the results. The method of surveying to be determined.
Is there a cost limit to what they would charge?
If the amount is under 5,000, then General Manager Constantouros could handle it. If the amount is more than that, which I would hope it isn't, but if it was, it would come before the board as a contract. So,
Yes.
Can't,
Authorize.
we can decide now what the upper limit would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got a range of 3,000 to 7,000, didn't we?
It's about 1,000 to 3,000 to do the survey, and then about another 3,000 to field responses, questions, and then also prepare a report. So you're looking at 4,000 to 6,000.
So we authorize a cap of $6,000?
Yeah.
That'd be, all right?
Why don't we make it 7, just in case? And we'll depend on you to be a tough negotiator.
I'm too cheap. All right. 7,000 with giving negotiation power to our general manager and Vice President Antoli?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
All right. If that's not too convoluted, please.
Dave Spathia, we're talking about 2 surveys now?
No.
Then what's, okay, we have Bayview, right, and a potential survey from
Yes,
them?
and that is correct. One will be a paper survey, and then we will also probably do a more defined survey.
Or alternatively, in the Bayview May invoice, they could indicate, take the survey, go online here, and have the,
Based on the HHF?
yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's a survey to obtain the same information.
Yeah.
We're just trying to reach people in as many different ways as we
Right.
can, so we get
Yes.
to
Right,
everybody.
but there's going to be one mechanism for
Yes.
taking the survey, is what you're saying.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't make any sense to have a survey done by Bayview and then a survey done by HHF.
No, Bayview's not taking the survey. They are distributing the survey for us in their mailing, right?
Okay, and then what?
There may be different mechanisms, because in order to reach a critical number, we may need to have mail-in, we may need to have online, we may need to, we're going to
So you're talking about a
utilize
potential
every method.
mechanism from Bayview?
Yes.
And then a potential mechanism from HHF?
Yes.
To make sure that you cover as many residents as possible?
I mean, as an example.
Exactly, yes, that's
And then
it.
in addition, we would then take this information and then it will be presented publicly and we
Right.
will have a
No, I
discussion.
understand.
That is not, nothing is the be-all, end-all here.
Right. No, I understand
The
that.
trick is always to get a survey that's effective, right? And
Right.
So that's what
Or
we're getting
multiple
at here.
surveys that are effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Sorry
All
again.
right.
But if you have 2 surveys, I mean, no, let's
I
say
think
you're
the
going to
confusion
do
is
one.
that it would be one survey created with the consulting from HHF, but it would be
Distributed in 2
distributed in different
ways.
ways, online and potentially by mail, or by mail may just be, here's the online link. We don't know that for sure yet, but it would just be one survey.
All right, and how are you going to be sure that one person doesn't do both forms and essentially gets 2 votes? That's what I'm asking. Would you have to put your name down on the survey?
We'll do consultation to determine scientific, oh, no, absolutely. We do think about that every time, so that,
Hey, folks, I'm sorry, I have to go. I have a prior commitment. I just want to say I support the survey. I think I anticipate everybody else will vote for it. I'm not going to be here to take the vote, and I apologize.
okay.
I have a quick philosophical question here. Cyrus Madavi, why are you all debating all this time over surveying for garbage, yet you are asking for ways that you can unilaterally take the police department out without a citizen vote? No, I'm serious. It's not funny.
We're not. We haven't unilaterally declared anything about the police department. We're still in the informational processing portion. We haven't made any decision.
This is actually not an agendized item, and I don't believe we can discuss it any further. Am I correct about that? It's not an agendized item.
I'm just saying, because this seems like a philosophical waste of time in some level.
Thank you. Any further comment? All right. There is a motion on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Oh, did
I'll
we?
second it.
I'm sorry, I thought we'd gotten to the second.
Okay.
So, excuse me, Director Natoli seconded it? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion, there's no no's, the motion passes 4-0. All right, now we move back to item 6, which is our general manager's report on the special session of February 12th.
I just think it'd be easier for me to speak from the podium here. The board held a meeting on Monday, February 12th. This was a special meeting, and this was a workshop-type meeting. These types of meetings have no minutes, there are no votes, and it's really an opportunity for discussion and share information. Now, because there were no minutes, I thought I would summarize for the community what was discussed and the kind of issues that were raised. The first one, some of these have been talked about already this evening, but I'll go ahead and cover them, was the informational meeting on Saturday, March 17th on the police department. And this is really an opportunity for the community to share their opinions on the police department. Now, the matrix and Richard Brady will provide an overview of the scope and purpose of the survey, and will update the community on where they currently are, which is very early in the process. But this really is a chance for the people of Kensington to speak up and say what kind of police department that you want. What are the law enforcement needs of the community? What's the ideal department that you want? And how does Kensington compare to these ideals? So I think we already indicated that we really encourage people. You can't pick a perfect date. This was the best date that was available. It is on a Saturday. We hope that people can come out. And there was some discussion on whether the meeting should be recorded or not. In general, community meetings like this, they aren't really board meetings. They're just opportunities for the community to express opinions, are not the kind of meetings that are generally recorded. But it really is up to the board in the end if the meeting is recorded. The real purpose of the meeting is to promote discussion and promote comments, not to inhibit them. And recordings do have a way for some people to inhibit discussion. Probably a lot of the people in this room, since you are here and speaking, are not inhibited, but there are members of the community that prefer not to be recorded. So that was the first item that was discussed. The second item was the community center renovation. And the board really went over through the schedule. The current schedule, as I understand, is that the bidders bidding will take place in early April, and that the bid opening is right now scheduled for mid-May, with start of construction probably in midsummer potentially. There is a 7 to 9 month period of construction. So that was the update on the community center. The board also discussed the serpentine rock that is out here nearby, and how to address that serpentine rock. There have been 2 quotes from 2 very good firms who've dealt with this kind of issue in the past, $2,000 and $2,800. And I think the general accepted practice is when you have 2 bids and they're from excellent firms and they're about equal, you take the lower of the 2. So we're in the process of finalizing that with a lower bidder. And Eileen Natoli has volunteered to assist with that process. We also discussed the public safety building, what's going on with the fire board, and where it currently stands. Lynn Welsh volunteered to act as a liaison with the fire board to keep everybody abreast of what kind of decision process is taking place and when it's appropriate for the police district to be involved.
The next item that was discussed was emergency services. The board did act on the Nixle option on February 8th, which is a potentially substantial service improvement to the community at a relatively low cost of $3,000 a year. This is a way for the community to communicate and be informed on emergencies that occur in town. We're currently in the final stages of finalizing that contract. And hopefully after a year, we'll get some feedback on how successful it was and then whether it really was of value to the community. Also discussed was the website development project that Director Deppie is currently spearheading. And if any of you have ever been involved in changing software, changing systems, it is a difficult process. It is not an easy process, and there are glitches and there are issues that come up. But the conversion has taken place, and the website is up and running. There are still issues being resolved, but they are being resolved one by one. So that was on the website development. The board also discussed police recruiting, which is also on tonight's agenda. And police recruiting, which has been discussed at a couple of meetings, is really an industry-wide issue. It's not just a Kensington issue. It really is difficult to find good candidates for police officer positions. The best approach is to try every technique. It isn't just to try one technique. Kensington in the past has focused on reserves, hiring reserves, but there are other ways of hiring police that we're promoting currently. One of them is there are temporary options. These do not really give you a police officer, a permanent police officer, but it does address an immediate need, and it's generally can be a little more time effective. And there are two techniques on temporary options. This is when you contract with another jurisdiction for one or two people, then you negotiate that with the jurisdiction. Another one is to hire retirees, police officers who have retired, and with the retirement programs that have been adopted in the last few years for police, there are a number of police who have retired at a young age and are willing to come back and work on a temporary basis. The consultant has told us that this is an option that is available to us and that they know that can be successful, but it is one of these temporary options. They're not permanent options. Another technique is laterals. Laterals is when a police officer is working in another agency and they transfer to an agency like Kensington. And Kensington is really an ideal place for officers who have a number of years' experience and are more interested in the community service aspect of policing rather than the action aspect of being on SWAT or going into barroom brawls or dealing with those kinds of police issues. And so it's a good technique for those kinds of officers, but there are some pay issues in Kensington that doesn't make this a feasible approach at this current time. In fact, some agencies even offer bonuses to attract officers from other agencies. So it's a one-time bonus. If you come work for us, we'll pay you X amount to try to attract officers. And then finally, the technique that has been most often used, but not really used that much in Kensington, is just simply recruiting for officers. And you find that larger agencies are more successful in recruiting for officers. They even have people dedicated who do just recruitment. They're just to go out into job fairs and try to find potential candidates. One of the things that we've tried to do is post the announcement on just about every website we can think of. You might get a hit on that kind of process, and you don't know unless you try it. And most of the websites are no cost. Some are at very minimal cost. One thing that we should be doing here in this area is doing area-wide joint recruitments. So instead of 4 or 5 agencies doing their own recruitment. We should attempt in the future to try to get the agencies to work together and do one recruitment. And then all the agencies could work together on one single list of candidates. We might have to compete with other agencies for the really good candidates, but it really promotes working well together. And it's a very effective recruitment tool because a person doesn't have to apply 5 times for a job. They just have to apply once and can be considered for multiple agencies. So and I think the chief will talk a little bit more about recruiting, and it's on the agenda tonight. Another item that was discussed was the administrative study that's currently underway, possibly will come to the board in April. The organization, Kensington, does not really have a strong administrative infrastructure. And so what happens is that the board steps in and volunteers step in to fill the void, and which is really wonderful, but it only partially solves some of these issues. So the administrative study is to find what positions we really need, what are the classification levels of these positions, what knowledge, skills, and abilities are required for these positions, what are the compensation levels. It's unlikely that these are going to be full-time positions. These are probably part-time, and possibly one position will do multiple tasks, but this will come out in this organizational study. We also talked about the budget and the role of the Finance Committee and trying to involve the Finance Committee in a more productive way. As the President indicated, there is actually 2 Finance Committees meetings this month, one on March 12th and one later in the month. The one on March 12th is more of a concept meeting. The one later will talk in more detail. The budget in Kensington does need a number of improvements, and it's the budget document. The funds are allocated correctly, and there's nothing inappropriate with the allocation, but it's a very difficult yet document to use for future planning. What I use is the Government Finance Officers Association checklist on what makes an outstanding budget. They actually give a Distinguished Budget Award if you can achieve these things, of which Kensington currently, there's about 20 factors, and I think Kensington has 3 or 4 of them currently. So we really have some work to do to upgrade the way the budget is presented. For example, strategic goals are usually included in the budget. Priorities and issues are included. There's policies that are included. All this kind of information is not currently included in the budget. There's long-range financial plans. We don't have them in the budget currently. Capital expenditures are identified separately. And then each organizational unit has goals and objectives. That's what we're measuring the budget for, is what are their goals and what are they going to accomplish. It isn't just money put in line items. These are to be spent on goals and objectives, and then at the end of the year, we measure the success of whether these goals and objectives were accomplished, and if they weren't, what were the reasons for it. And finally, another factor that the government finance officers recommends is an understandability and usability to the community. And I think that our current budget is not really that clearly understandable and usable to the community. So we want to create a format where it really is the public's budget. It is not an audit of the services. It is a way that the community knows what is being done and has input into this to make sure that those are the goals and the objectives and what the community wants to see accomplished over the next year. I'm also a believer in multi-year budgeting, so I want to explore doing more than just one budget every year. The board also talked about transparency and ways to improve transparency. And there is the Special District Leadership Foundation has a list of items that promote transparency in special districts. Currently Kensington, the police district has accomplished a number of these items, but there are a few more items that need to be looked at and addressed. And the new website is actually one way of moving in that direction. Also, one of the items, for example, that is recent that the board has undertaken is a regular district newsletter. And with Director Natoli's efforts, that item, which is included as an item of transparency, has recently been initiated. And then finally, the final item that I had on my list here of what was discussed at the meeting was the Procedures and Policy Manual, which if any of you have any experience with it, you know that it's really out of date. It's nearly obsolete. It does not include current best practices. And there's been efforts in the past to try to update it that have, because of the complexity and the volume of different policies, has not been successful. So we want to look at looking at the good work that was done in the past, and we have formed a committee and divided the workload among the committee to look at each section of the policy manual to bring forth a really usable document that reflects current times at least. It probably is going to go into next fiscal year before it's completed, but it will be completed. So this was a summary of the items that were discussed and some of the perspectives, and also I snuck in some of my opinions too. So,
thank you. Just to dovetail, every resident should have received our first KPPCSD newsletter in your mailbox about a week ago. Is that where we have extra copies at the district office? And I have one extra here in case anyone did not receive one. But please let us know via email or personally if you did not receive that, so that we can follow up and make sure. If we publish one of these twice a year, up to at least twice a year, we do fulfill transparency requirements that help us earn a certificate.
And I believe it's on the website as well.
It is on the website also, but we want you to all have a physical copy, you know.
Where would you find it on the website? Under which area?
Governance newsletter, I think.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to item 7, the consent calendar. If you would like to give public comment.
So I would just like to point out what you all just heard. This board met in a special meeting, it declared a special meeting, and it discussed the matrix meeting, community center renovation, Serpentine Rock, public safety building, emergency services, and so forth. A whole series of items that have come under discussion here routinely in their regular meetings. I continue to be bothered by the fact that these are not really special items that they're discussing. They are the routine items that we've all heard about for any length of time. And that this was called under special rules, which Ann will tell you are all perfectly legal. They gave 24 hours notice. They held it at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, not exactly a time when we're expecting meetings to be held. No minutes required to be taken. There was one member of the public who was quick enough on her feet to go to this meeting, and that was Dr. Delk here. I showed up for about 10 minutes because I could and did. I'm bothered by this. And transparency was one of the items that you mentioned, Tony. And again, I say, I know that you're allowed to do this. I don't need to be told again. But I think in the interest of the public's perception, you can do better with a little bit more advance warning on these.
We look forward to having more advance warning. Unfortunately, I had a director that was unable to confirm a goal-setting session, which is what this was. Goal setting is very important for all professional organizations. Workshopping, we make no decisions, we just simply set priorities. So there were members of the public there, more than just one or two, and we had a discussion where no decisions were made, but it does allow us to share information, such as we have a survey for the Serpentine Rock, and we're going forward with that. But no decision is made by the board members. Dr. Spath?
Yeah, Dave Spath. General Manager Constantinos mentioned about the schedule for the work on the building, implying or indicating that you're going to go out for bids in April with a construction scheduled to start in the summer. Now, if we are still short $360,000, is that going to be a staged construction? If you're able to answer this question. I know it's not on the agenda, but it was mentioned by the general manager. So could you clarify that?
I've spoken about this several times and indicated that there was a mistaken piece of information that we had to have all the money in hand in order to go to bid. So we do not have to have all the money in hand in order to go to bid. The fact of the matter is that there are several sources still available to fund the project, and since much of it is going to happen in 2018 and 2019, the 2018-19 budget year, the 2018-19 budget is another source of funds. A loan is another source of funds. And I know the community wants to raise more money, and we understand that's not going to happen overnight, but there are other sources of funds. So we're continuing to go forward, and we will, fund as we get solid numbers from the bids. The board will continue to make decisions to fund the project.
No, I know we can go out for bid without having the money in hand, but we can't sign a contract for construction without having the money in hand, presumably. I think that's correct. Or am I wrong on that? Okay, and that was my understanding. But anyways, so it's quite possible that you may be seeking a loan, you may be looking to draw from the 2018-2019 budget, et cetera.
Yep, these are all things we've talked about.
Yep.
So, referring to the general manager's statement about transparency, under what conditions is it?
Excuse me, would you be kind enough to spell your last name? It's hard.
M-O-D-A-V-I.
Okay. Thank you.
Under what conditions is it that you don't necessarily need to keep notes if we're talking about transparency? Because usually that's like done in government when it's considered a top secret thing or when there are security concerns.
Well, this certainly wasn't a top secret meeting of the Defense Department.
That's not what I'm implying. I'm just asking, since it was a public, what are the conditions under which you don't necessarily need to take these notes, and why would you not need to take them if you're talking about transparency?
Taking notes is unrelated to transparency. That's a different.
How is that unrelated? Because isn't the point of in the federal government or state government, everything has a massive paper trail? And when the government lapses in that, we call it not being transparent.
I'd be glad to answer your question if you allow me to. This is these types of workshops are a common practice in local government, and they're just made for discussion. And I've attended probably no less than 30 of them in my career, but they're only for discussion. You can't.
But you said you set goals, which means that in some implicit way you had some directional thought that you came from that.
But there can be no motions. There can be no motions, and there were no motions. And I also did tonight a pretty extensive summary of the entire meeting in detail.
So then will also summarize what the goals that sort of were agreed on?
I did in my presentation.
Specifically, could you, maybe because I missed them, because it seemed to be you made some generic statements about we will do these things, but as a council, what does that sort of imply you're thinking you're going to do?
Well, I think I was pretty clear in my presentation.
So that will be included in all this will be included in the write-up that goes online after this meeting.
I didn't understand your question.
I mean, like, so we keep notes of like this meeting and like all the statements that are made go onto the website.
Correct.
So your goals will presumably be somehow very clear in that write-up.
They'll be what I said, yes. You know, and understand that things do change, though, like the community center the dates may change, some of these dates. That was the planning at the time, it was the.
Yes, like, we understand that, like, these are not binding decisions, like, you know, schedules change and stuff, but, like, that is slightly different than when you make decisions. But anyway, that's just my point, is that if you're talking about all this transparency, why is it that you suddenly decide that you don't need, like, notes to be taken since everything else needs to have notes, like these meetings? That was it, that's all I'm making.
Time for one more?
Always.
Okay, thanks. Paul Doro. I have a comment, no questions, and nobody needs to respond to me. But from the tenor of the comments and questions that have been raised here, I think you may perceive that you've created a transparency issue revolving around the special meeting on the 12th. At the Thursday meeting on the 8th, the President specifically stated there will be no more meetings in March. It's in the minutes that are included in the agenda for tonight. So Monday morning, I opened up my email and saw several people had said, "Did you see the special notice?" Well, it was probably about 10 o'clock by the time I got to the website and looked and downloaded the special notice. And I saw that looking at the PDF and looking at the metadata that was in the PDF, I saw that it had been created at 10 p.m. on Saturday night. So what is it about this kind of a long-range, big think, planning, goal-setting meeting that requires the rush to get it out there and then to publish the notice of special meeting with a bare minimum legal notice, and then to say, oh, we're not going to have any minutes either? That's my only comment. Think about the appearance of that to anybody who thinks that you're trying to hide the ball.
Anthony Knight again. I meant to make another point and slipped my mind. Tony, you presented the intent of this meeting as a goal. I'm sorry, what? Oh, as a goal-setting meeting. So what you presented this evening as a reflection of the meeting, I didn't hear you use the word goal-setting. You said, we discussed this, we discussed that, we discussed the other. Essential to goal-setting is prioritization. And to me, that's really missing in everything that's gone on here in this discussion. And what bothers me a lot in this list, you listed 11 items, is the police recruiting. That was number 7 on your list. The matrix was number 1. If I had been allowed to stay at that meeting, if time had permitted, I definitely would have made a fuss about that. I would have said, hey, I want to understand how you prioritize these things, and I sure want to see the safety of the community up at the top, not at number 7.
Well, again, that was a list. That wasn't a list of priorities, and
Exactly. That's what I'm grousing about.
that was an option. This was only a discussion of what the long-term and short-term goals are. It wasn't a prioritization. But a board member could express an opinion on that if they chose to.
All right, thank you. We're now going to move on to the consent calendar. Number 7. There any public comment on minutes? Board member comment? All right, then I will make a motion that we adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes 4-0. All right, we'll move on to item 8A, an update on police staffing from Chief Hull. No, it's 9. Yes. Yes, please.
Hello, everyone. Oh, yeah, no worries. I'm going to give you a quick update on what's been done to date as far as recruitment for our staff with the police department. As I've said in the past, we've had 5 applicants. Recently, we had one applicant who was 1/3 through the background process. Unfortunately, that applicant has been rejected. So what that leaves us to date is, out of the 5 applicants that we've had, 3 have been rejected, 2 have been brought on as reserves. One of the purpose of the reserve programs was to give us an opportunity to see how individuals can work in an environment with limited resources. It's not always successful, but I think it had a greater success rate than not having us an opportunity to work with an individual first. As far as advertisement for the position, last month there was a joint county police chiefs meeting with the chiefs of Alameda County and the chiefs of Contra Costa County. At that meeting, I made a verbal announcement about the recruitment opportunities that we have here for the District of Kensington for both lateral police officer and reserve police officers. I have, the job announcement has been placed on the district website, and it's been placed on the CSD website, which is a California Special Districts Association website. One of the issues that we have with recruitment is competitively, because of the pay, we don't get a lot of inquiries. I wanted to put the advertisement on the special districts website because out of the approximately 56 special districts in the state, about half of them have a law enforcement component, and the pay is competitive there. So if we had a higher opportunity of getting a lateral, it would have been through that route. I'm also in the process now of trying to get the advertisement on the California Police Officer Standard and Training website. The acronym for that is POST. And once I can get it, it gets uploaded to that website, we should be getting more exposure. To date, I think I should probably let you be aware that I have made a conditional job offer to one of the reserve officers who is currently out of town right now, and I will continue this dialogue once they return. So I've had permission to bring on another officer. I've vetted the 2 reserves that we had and made a decision about one of them. So we're starting to increase the staffing a little bit, and I would like to express that I'm appreciative of that. I'm sure some of the officers that have been working these shifts will be appreciative of that also. The most effective method that I have come across right now for recruiting is word of mouth. I was out at an event, and I had ran into one of the retired police officers from Richmond who had heard word of mouth that we were recruiting. And he said that he would let some individuals that he knows who were interested in reserve positions. So I'm waiting for some inquiries there. At this point right now, we have no one in background. So I'm still waiting, hopefully, to get some responses from the different avenues of advertisement that I've taken, and so we can start working on filling those positions. Any questions?
No, thank you.
No worries.
I spent most of my adult life hiring people. I worked in an industry that had fair wages, so that may have helped it some. But if you need staffing, you got to hire them. You got to find them. You can't wait for someone else to help you. My assumption is that we need at least 8 officers, probably 9. We are still at 5. You need to find 3 or 4 officers. I don't know if you are going to do it, if Tony is going to do it. It doesn't matter who does it. But you took a job, so go and get people. So go out there and hire someone. This doesn't make any sense to me. You can't just say, I passed the word, and they are going to hire someone. That's your job.
The major element into hiring an individual is you have to have an individual present themselves and demonstrate interest. Without that,
and pass the background check, so.
Dave Spathka, you mentioned on the retired officers, you want to hire them as reservists, but it strikes me as that you could hire them as full-time as a bridge, because if they're PERS retirees.
Is that correct? Is that correct that you want to hire retired officers as reservists?
That's what he said.
That's why I'm asking for clarification. That's not what I understand.
Well, I may have misunderstood what he said, but Chief Hull said he wants to hire, he was talking about, he talked to a Richmond retired police officer who was going to talk to others and hire them as a reserve. Now,
I don't think he meant talking to other retired officers, just meant that he would talk to people he knew interested in going into a reserve position.
that's what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
a reserve position and maybe I'm misunderstanding what he means by a reserve position, as opposed to a full-time position.
Let's ask Chief Hull to clarify that, because I didn't understand it the same way.
my mistake if I wasn't clear about that. I am not trying to hire a retired officer or a annuitant as a reserve officer. The retired officer annuitant position is wholly independent of the reserve position. The retired officer annuitant position is a paid position. The reserve position is not.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm a retired annuitant, by the way, just for everybody's information.
Ready to join the police force?
But I don't have the post certificate to start out with.
See you swinging a billy club.
Nor do I know if I could pass the background check. But anyways, I certainly would encourage you to look at retirees, because again, I'll go to the point of being a bridge, because they can work 960 hours a year, and you could work them for half the year while you're recruiting and maybe be able to bring someone on, and then that person can go back into retirement, and then you would have a full-time position while carrying it through. Now, I see Officer Barrow coming up, so there may be something to do with the contract that may preclude that, but I don't know that at all. So
That is in the works. That is in the works. And there's some procedures that need to be followed, and those procedures will be started next week.
No, I think we should probably.
I'm sorry, could you clarify that so that I can capture it in the minutes? What, Eileen?
There are procedures that are required in order to make, and conditions that that the board is aware of, the general manager and Chief Hull are aware of, so we are following correct procedures in order to possibly, to explore all of our staffing options.
Okay, thank you.
So I hate to not be specific, but I want to be.
Yeah, I just want to make one clarification. What General Manager Constanturis presented were the options that we have, or options that any law enforcement organization has at its disposal. And one of those options would be the retired annuitant. That is not one of the options that we are exercising here right now. The only options that we are exercising is a academy graduate or a lateral officer from another department, or the reserve program. There are some issues concerning the retired annuitant that would have to be worked out before that would be an option.
You don't have to. It's your choice.
Keith Barrow, POA president. We weren't going to talk about this tonight. We had discussed about talking about it next week with our lawyers. There's a lot more about retired annuitants. There's a lot of training that has to go into it. They can only work 960 hours throughout the year. The way our policies are set up, you have to do at least 400 hours of training. That pretty much eats up most of the year. Plus you're with another officer, so that officer has to do daily evals. There's a lot more work involved. So bringing on an annuitant, we wouldn't have one on for a while, just due to the training. You can't just bring them on one day and all of a sudden they can start working. We weren't going to discuss this, and I didn't want to bring this up, but we also have a reserve right now. We could hire them like we're doing the other one. That hasn't been explored either. So we also haven't explored going to the academy and sponsoring somebody, putting somebody through the academy. Sometimes we get people, we've had a few people that we've sponsored. Within 6 months, they could be on our department. When they get out, they would start working from there. There's a lot of other things we can do. This annuitant thing was brought up. We were going to discuss it next week with our lawyers on both sides, and frankly, we're just not ready to be talking about it tonight. So, sorry it was brought up.
But you must come forward to the microphone.
Can reserves be brought on board right away if they're hired? Don't they have training requirements too? They have to serve with a field training officer, et cetera.
Speaking to the reserves we have now, they've already completed some training. They've already done their backgrounds, everything else, so we'd complete their training. But if they're full-time officers, we could do 40 hours a week, and within a month or a month and a half, they would be able to go out on solo. If we get a reserve, they do 20 hours a month. And if they're doing a few hundred hours, you add up how many months they're going to do before they can actually, the annuitants, if we bring them on, they could come on. If they're going to work 40 hours a week, then we could do the same thing, but it would take several months to get them going. And then they would only have 500, 600 hours left to do throughout the year. They'd be a part-time employee at best. Or they'd run out of hours and then we wouldn't be able to use them for the rest of the year. So.
All right, thank you. Chief, sorry.
I did have a comment here on that these were temporary approaches that I noted in my presentation. One was the 960 office, this annuitant, and the possibility of even contracting with another agency. These were just, and I think one of the speakers had indicated that you could fill these positions temporary while you were recruiting. So these are just stopgap temporary solutions. They're not permanent solutions. And one of the requirements is that we do have to discuss this with the Police Officers Association, and there are meetings scheduled next week before we can even go down that path. And we don't agree with the opinion that was expressed tonight. I have a very different opinion. I don't think the training is quite as lengthy as was presented by the sergeant. We have a friendly disagreement, but we do not agree with that. It depends on the officer you hire. If you have someone who's been out of service recently, the training is much less. So, but we will be discussing it. We aren't going to be acting on it till we finish those discussions.
Absolutely. All right, yes, Ms.
I'm Randy Weiss. I understood that the salaries are not competitive. Is that and that the officers here are paid less than in other communities? Is that correct?
They are, when we've done studies, yes, we are lower on the salary scale. We offer much larger benefit package than other agencies. So it is a matter of priorities and
right. So why, if we're operating with 5 and we've got a budget for what, 10? Why couldn't we operate with 8 or 9 and take that one salary and maybe distribute it, or lower the benefit package and raise the salaries a little so that we get police officers? I mean, we're talking about prioritizing. this board is going to go out to this community and ask for $360,000 to complete this building, and we
Ma'am,
don't have
let
enough.
me, please let me, that is a community fundraising effort, of which we are very appreciative, but it has not been asked for by the board. I am working with them to provide them with information to make sure that their fundraising is accurate, but I want to be clear on that. It's lovely effort by the community to want to help on this project, but please be clear about that.
Why don't you go out and ask the community to raise money so that we can get more policemen?
I'm not asking the community to raise money for the community center, and we've just concluded a memorandum of understanding with the police officers, and all the terms are available to review with a salary increase and other items. So we've just concluded an MOU with the police officers.
I just want to make one other comment. I don't come to these meetings often, but the meetings that I have come to, and especially tonight, I think there are a lot of very unhappy people here, especially the way things are going. We ask questions, we can't get answers. I think the board has a lot to do to make the community in Kensington a bit more satisfactory to our residents. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Further public comment? Yeah.
Madam President, you are correct that the salaries that we pay are lower than most of the surrounding communities. When you say that our benefits are greater than other communities, that's not correct. Our pension benefit structure is the same as El Cerrito, and the medical benefits are the same. Only Albany has a lower pension benefit arrangement than we do. Where we are different is in our medical retiree. We cover retirees and their spouses for
And
medical.
their dependents.
And their dependents, if they have dependents at that age. Remember, it only goes up to 18 if you're
26.
26, excuse me, I'm sorry. But other than that, when you say that our benefits are the same for active employees, that is not correct by and large. Pensions are the same, 3% at 50, and the medical is the same. We rate it at the Kaiser rate, the same way as El Cerrito, the same way as Albany, and presumably Berkeley. So it's no different. In fact, Albany, as I said, is the only one that has a less lucrative benefit in the PERS pension than we do.
But Dr. Spath, you know the impact of the retiree medical on our...
No, I'm not discounting that whatsoever, and I think that's something that you can address in future contracts, and I've mentioned that before, and I have no reason to believe that you shouldn't, because I think it is a significant imposition financially that this community probably cannot sustain going forward. Other than that, however, again, I want to make it clear that our pension and medical benefits for active employees is no different than mostly anybody else.
Thank you.
There are issues with everything you do in life. And your lay board, you are the professional people. You have an issue. You need to solve it. Now, you talk about it's going to take so many weeks to train people. We lost most of our officers before the end of the year, or by the end of the year. We've been at 5, a strength of 5. We are approaching the middle of March, so we've spent sort of 10 weeks talking about things. You may have done something, but it wasn't successful. You need to do something that brings results. You need to hire some people, whatever it takes. Hire them.
I'm sort of curious why the board actually really doesn't want to talk about this. Like, you seem to be so concerned about these other issues, but even though the fact is most faculty, most other people who come to Kensington come to it because it's a safe community with its good school for younger children. And so essentially somehow the police force, which is one of the selling points of this town, has fallen to like the lower end of the things you actually want to talk about. What is the logic in that, as a board that is supposed to be dealing with this town to take care of it?
Well, I'll have you understand that an agenda is we're a business meeting. So we legally cannot speak on issues that we have not agendized. And what we are speaking on now is police staffing, and we have spoken about it over various meetings. It is a major concern to this board, hence why we have an ongoing study authorized with Matrix Consulting.
You're letting a study deal with this. You aren't dealing with it. That's a very fundamental difference. Apologies. I'm just, yes.
Yes. Yes. So we hope that you'll attend the Matrix study. We let professionals do it because there are Policeman's Bill of Rights and PROBAR that we must require. So if you would like to make a comment, you need to come forward and not shout out during the meeting. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought I only had one more thing, but this is a second thing. I believe Director Hassai just mentioned that there is a new MOU. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't find it on the website.
It's not finalized. The
Not
board.
final.
Not final?
It's been in, I don't know, when the last meeting was, we discussed it. It's on, there was an MOU in the minutes. It hasn't been completely signed off on, but we authorized the general manager and council to finalize it. The pay increase has been done. This is not new news. It's.
So, and where is
January, our January agenda would have the
that? Somewhere
draft.
in the attachments to the agenda?
Yes, well, within the agenda would be the draft that we agreed that the general manager and our council was allowed to execute with the KPOA.
Okay. Similarly, and I know the website's a work in progress, and I applaud you for taking it on, Director Deppie, and it's a nice-looking website, but it's not a completed product yet. And there's a few other things that I would have expected to see there, like the current contract with the interim chief of police. That may be there somewhere in the minutes or whatnot.
Oh, if you're looking for a document, we've asked, please email the webmaster or talk to Mr. Deppie and Director Deppie, and we will make sure that it's there or direct you to where you can find it.
So it's pretty hard to ask for things that aren't there when you don't know they're missing. You get my point?
Well, I
don't know they're missing, then
Yeah, well,
why-
if they're not there and you don't know that you're looking for them, you don't know what to look for. It's not there. How do you know it's not, how do you know that what you're
Can't
looking
know an
for should be
unknowable.
there
Is it
and is
Donald
not?
Rumsfeld question? Or?
No. If
Am I
if you-
correct that everything was transferred over, Chris?
Pardon?
No, not
Everything
everything
was
was
not
transferred
transferred
over.
Yeah. And
It's
unfortunately,
possible some things were transferred over, but again, if you're looking for something and you can't find it, just let me know.
Sure. Well, here's a good example. In 2009, there was a final report by Brown Taylor on outsourcing. I looked for that on the website and couldn't find it.
Just, I'll look for it tomorrow.
Okay, let me know. I've got a copy.
But, okay, well, just, again, those kind of things, please email me. I think everyone who's done that knows that I'm
Okay, now
respond very
here's the
quickly.
second question. Is there, I'm sure there is, an archive of the old website somewhere? These things don't just go off to the elephant
I've got
page already.
an offline archive of, it's
Exactly.
not in the best format because the old website was not in the best format in the first place, so it's kind of tough to go through and pick apart what's sitting there, but it's an offline archive, so we do have everything's.
Right, right. I assume it's been preserved because there are other things in the nature. For example, there was a draft report by Brown Taylor. It would be interesting to compare the differences between the draft and the final version, but I don't know where the draft is. And we can go on and on. Those things used to be there, and now they're not, or at least I can't find them. So.
Just, again, email me if you can't find something, and I'll if I can find it, I'll get it.
Okay.
we had always hoped to keep the old website up for the next year, but unfortunately, it was hacked twice, and we don't know what viruses and what malware has been put on it. So for us to leave you access could be dangerous to your electronic devices. So
Sure.
that's why we made the decision to pull it offline.
Maybe just a bunch of dumb PDFs would be something that could be made available. Anyway, thank you very much.
I'm Vita Doro, and I've got a question about this hacking that you're talking about, where I happen to be someone who notifies the police department whenever I'm out of town. So I'm concerned what was hacked, and if the information that I leave with the police department saying I'm going to be out of town was somehow
Well, this was
made
prior to
public.
2018. So if you,
Yes, I do that on almost every 6 weeks.
Are you concerned if any of your personal information is compromised?
Yes. And if it was,
no, we do not
the
believe
site was
that.
hacked.
It was the website, but not the district's computers or the district's database or the district's documents. It was just the website.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 9C. Should we, it is 1/4 or 10 till, depending on which clock you believe. I'm sorry, do you have exact time? 9:47. You want to make a motion that we continue until 10:30?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we continue the meeting to at most 10:30 to discuss item 9C.
All right, all in favor?
Should I second it?
Oh, please do.
Yeah, I second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the motion passes 4-0. All right, Director Debbie, would you like to introduce this item? It appears on page 69 of this evening's agenda.
Right, I think just a couple of things first about the agenda. I believe that we have 5 polls, not 7. Is that right?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was,
Chief Hull, we have 5 polls for the portable signs, is that correct? Okay, good. Right, and the fiscal impact, the solar-powered sign is actually 4,000, not 3,500. That was I got 2 or 3 different quotes from this company, and I'd misread one of them. So again, we've got 5 poles, 2 portable signs. The 5 poles are, I think, north and south on Arlington. There's one by the school. There's one on Kenyon and one on Franciscan. And they've been moved around a little bit, but they seem to be sort of become a little static in their placement. I've always thought, when I have seen the sign when it was on Franciscan, it made a big impact on drivers. I think the radar signs in general, they help with speeders, just letting them know that they're going too fast. I know Franciscan, for instance, most people don't even realize how fast they go when they come down the street. So I saw that it helped there.
Excuse me. Can I ask that all conversations be taken out if you're not listening to the presentation? I'm having trouble hearing.
I also think that the signs just in general raise the public awareness of traffic enforcement. So if someone sees a sign as they come into the community, they might be more cognizant of the police are doing traffic enforcement. I think that it would help if people see the signs that there is traffic enforcement going on, but I think that's getting improved. So in general, I think that radar signs are good. And I thought it'd be a good idea to discuss getting more, 1 or more radar signs. There's 2 types of signs. We've got the portable. They have to change the batteries, I think, every 2 weeks, and they can be moved from sign to sign, and that was the idea, to get 5 signs, get a couple of, 5 poles and get a couple of signs and move them around as needed. There was a problem in that changing the batteries, again, has to be done, and someone told me today that the Kenyon sign's not working, so it could be that the batteries run out, and that's another problem with battery-powered signs. The other type is what you see on the Arlington and Berkeley, where they're solar-powered, where they're really a fixed sign with a solar-powered generator, and they don't need to have the battery replaced. They're a little more expensive, as you can see, not a whole lot, which is kind of surprising. And that would be another option, to get 1 or 2 of those and put them in permanent places. Now that means that you don't have the other signs to move around, but they might be a better option for the streets that we really know that they're needed on. They do have a slight disadvantage in that they're a little more fragile. So if someone hits the pole and that solar panel goes to the ground, it's probably going to get destroyed. The signs themselves are pretty robust, but the solar generator is kind of fragile, so there's a little more danger of some damage there. And Contra Costa Roadworks told me that they can be sort of attractive for thieves. The signs themselves, no one seems to want, but the solar panels sometimes get stolen. I'm not sure if it's sitting on the top of a sign, top of a pole, if we'd have to worry about that, but that's one concern. And I wanted to hear from the chief if there was a strategy for our current signs and what the police feel about if they would rather have some permanent solar, more portable, just, and if, one more thing, all these signs come with software where you can download data and you can analyze how the signs are working and what the speed is, and I'm curious what the status of getting that going as well.
I could tell you that I would prefer to have the solar-powered signs because it can be inconsistent as when those batteries are getting changed. We were on a schedule; they were getting changed once per week. I'm going to have to figure out how to reinstitute that so that it continues to get done. What we've had is once we had the person that was changing the batteries since retired. We had a new person assigned to it, but we're down to one radar right now. One of the radars is back at the shop being repaired. There's two ways that I think is kind of dangerous with with those radars. They're pretty bulky, robust, but they're heavy, and they have to be picked up and changed and taken from one pole to the next. That's one method. It could get damaged. The other method is obviously changing the battery. So if we didn't have the battery issue, that would eliminate that problem. How the radar signs have been assigned, we would limit it to 2 radar signs. I think we had them sitting on one on Franciscan and one on Arlington Avenue for about six or 7 months. One of the reasons that was so is because those are the 2 most heavily trafficked roadways in town. So in order to kind of get the traffic under control, and I can attest to the radar signs did make a difference. I can tell when I'm driving in the morning. I can tell when I'm driving around town in an unmarked vehicle. Now I can tell that radar sign is no longer there because the traffic has inched up and inched up and inched up again. But radar signs alone won't solve the problem. It's going to have to be a combination between radar signs and physical enforcement. And we are doing that with the resources that we have.
What would you?
Oh, the data, collecting the data.
The data. One of the things that when we decide to move a sign, it will be because we physically see a difference in the traffic. Now, collecting the data, we have not been collecting the data for a while. We had an IT person who's no longer with us, so until we can reestablish someone to deal with the IT portion of it, then we'll be able to collect that data.
Was it useful when you did collect it?
I didn't see how it was utilized to make any determinations as to when to move it or how to move it. I'm kind of an old-fashioned guy. I can sit on a corner and work a corner, and I can physically tell, its effectiveness. One of the most difficult places to work is Franciscan Avenue, because there's really nowhere that you can sit to be able to monitor the traffic without being seen at least 300 yards down the road. So
That was my question, was to ask, what do you think is the most dangerous spot to change the location, to affix and remove the sign, and what do you think would be the location or locations that would be the most effective for us to have permanent signage?
Oh, I can tell you immediately. The permanent signage would be Franciscan Way, Arlington Avenue, and Kenyon. There's a sign in front of Hilltop School, right? With the media blitz with verbal conversations with parents, with mailers to parents, and with a sign sitting out in front of the school as you're driving in, the speed sign. That speed sign, I don't think necessarily has to stay there as long as it should on some of the main thoroughfares. Everyone understands that Kenyon is kind of a slope, and when you're coming down Kenyon, which is pretty long, either in vehicles and bicycles as well, they normally generate some pretty high speeds. So
I know there's a contingent of folks from Purdue here, and that's, also a major thoroughfare as people kind of come around Grizzly Peak and Beloit and then cut through. I don't know, that's also very narrow because there's, a lot of cars. Any thought about, Purdue or?
Well, it's been my experience, let's say Beloit is another roadway that has a long straightaway that goes downhill. But because you have a reduced width road, you have parking on the south side of the road, that's normally enough to kind of keep traffic down Beloit, from my experience, under control. But it for sure, it's the Franciscan Way, the both directions on Arlington Avenue, and coming downhill on Kenyon.
Thank you, so does the board have a recommendation about what action you would like to take?
Or do we have public comments? Patiently waiting.
Save the best for last. My name's Dawn Mackey. I just want to say that I just noticed there's this beautiful dog behind you, and he's peeking out, and that was the best part of my night. But this is my first meeting.
Ours too.
And yeah, so I've been a Kensington resident for about 8 years, and last year moved to Purdue Avenue. And it was at that time that actually our son, who's now 10, actually learned how to cross the street because he really had to for fear of his safety. So I've actually had a lot of conversations with some board members here, neighbors, and also the county supervisor. His name is John Swan, who's a very nice gentleman, regarding the traffic on Purdue. So I used to live on Amherst and never really was concerned about it. So Purdue, I've actually called the local non-emergency number several times, just requesting that there be, maybe the police come by, and you guys have come by, thank you, but I know it's kind of a hard street to manage, but I can tell you that during that time, I've seen 3 accidents right in front of me where cars are just wiping off mirrors from my tenant that was behind me, from the neighbor next door, and then the car across coming out of their driveway got sideswiped, which I know the police was there for that. And I think part of it is people aren't reporting things because they don't want to do it to their insurance company. So I don't really have a lot of data, because some people have come up with amazing data, and I don't have that other than my observations and concerns. So on the positive, my son definitely knows how to cross the street now, but every morning I am concerned about his safety. So I'm peeking out, even though he's with my partner. I'm a little overprotective, but it makes me really nervous, for sure. So I guess the concern, my request is if we could consider a radar sign for that. And speaking to the county supervisor, John Swan, he thought that would be something good to do, for sure. He actually said he came to the street last month and noticed that there's all these no parking signs on the one side, because you can only park on one side. So I think the challenge is not necessarily that it's speed, but it's more that it's really a narrow street, so everybody's trying to squeeze in. But there is speed coming around Kenyon to Purdue to Kenyon, and also coming from Beloit, people are just, I don't know how they do it. I couldn't even do it if I tried, but just whizzing by. So you've probably seen me out there, because I'm usually the person like this. Anybody travel Purdue that's here at all? Anybody? So it is a main thoroughfare. So if maybe the consideration could be to get a radar sign. They are actually going to post speed signs, which I thought was, I didn't even ask for, so I thought that was amazing. But I know as a driver, I really don't pay attention to the speed signs. But those radar signs totally remind me, and I'm not really a fast driver, but it does make me stop and think about that. So if Purdue could be on the radar, I'd really greatly appreciate that.
Is Purdue often sort of a gateway street to Kenyon? I mean, is that?
Yes.
So I'm just curious if it would be possible to maybe take a sign and sort of alternate between Kenyon and Kenyon Purdue, to sort of catch people at different points of their journey. I don't know the traffic patterns that well, but it seems like if people are going to be speeding on Kenyon, they're probably going to start on Purdue.
But Dawn, if I understood correctly, you were saying that speed is really an issue around Beloit, coming down Beloit and coming off of Kenyon or onto Kenyon. So it's mostly that it's narrow. So if there's radar signs on Beloit and on Kenyon, that might also help. It just immediately flashes before they're getting on Purdue, because I know that it is. People don't speed down Purdue too much. Sometimes they do. They go faster than they should, given how narrow it is.
And there are actually even, and I know there's actually data that the county supervisor, I don't know if he's the county supervisor, but he's the head of the traffic, whatever that is. But he said there actually is data, so the average speed is maybe 35, or it's 25, right? So it's like 31, 32 miles per hour. But I think because it's so narrow, it feels like they're going faster. Also because we live about 3 houses from Beloit, it just feels different because I work from home, so I'm walking the streets. I see these guys quite a bit. I also have a video camera that goes outside the street, and I just want to thank you guys. I see you patrolling actually every night on my video. So I know you guys are out and about there, so I appreciate that. But maybe because it's the size of the street, but definitely people are speeding, but it's just a strange kind of street. But people are traveling. I used to go that way all the time myself, going to Lafayette. So just here to tell you that it's a problem. I brought my couple neighbors. Couldn't get everybody for the short notice, but thank you for anything that you guys could help with. I appreciate it.
My one question would be about pole placement. We clearly would need to add an additional pole on Purdue if it wasn't going to be on Beloit, and about pole placement on Purdue.
Yeah,
because I drive it every day, probably about 4 times a day, but very slowly.
Yeah, what I think I heard was 2 poles, one on Beloit and one on Purdue. And yeah, I can work with the county to get that done. There's a little process that they need to fulfill.
So we could add, so we could,
little encroachment permits.
yes, our encroachment, and then it would make
Before the fact, right?
our agenda correct. So 2 polls, okay.
I'm Don's neighbor, Dave Spathian, and I see you coming to and from as well. But I just want to reiterate what Don is saying. And it really is, it's a feeder street from Beloit, and people coming from on the east side of the hills, and even from campus, and come through Purdue, down to Kenyon, Westminster, and then to the Arlington. So you see that in the evening, but conversely, in the morning, you see it just the opposite, where people will speed from the crest of Purdue to Beloit. And on the other side, going down Purdue is pretty steep. And some people really take off down there, and when you have not enough space, that's when you lose the side view mirrors as well. So anyways, I certainly support Don's request on this, and thank you for the consideration.
Well, I guess I'm going to suggest that we ask Chief Hull to look into getting 2 poles for Beloit and Purdue through the county, and that perhaps we authorize the purchase of 2 solar-powered fixed radar signs, possibly to go on Arlington and Franciscan, leaving our 2 portables to move for locations now, and then we can talk about adding more signs at maybe a later date.
Does anybody know sort of the budget implications for that, where it would come out of? Do we have capital money for that, or? I assume we do, and it's not much to ask, but I want to just be clear that we have it budgeted somehow.
We do have it budgeted, excuse me. And as soon as I find the line item at 10:15, I'll.
That's also, yeah, sure.
While you're doing that, I have a question. So a solar-powered fixed radar sign refers to just the sign that would go on top of a pole?
Well, it goes on the pole, and then the solar collector goes on top of it. So the sign is fixed perpendicular to the pole, or, you know, just like a speed sign. And then the solar-powered, or the solar collector is on top of the pole, sitting at an angle, trying to collect the energy.
Right. I guess my question is, so is that going to be moved, or?
I would assume no, that's a fixed. Those aren't meant to be moved, those are meant to be permanently placed.
Okay.
Also be good to find out, given that they have some problems, whether those would be covered by our insurance in any way. I'm just kind of curious if.
I mean, if they're hit or damaged?
Yeah.
I think it can come out of our police traffic equipment, 966. We currently have an annual budget of $8,800, and we've spent $100 of that.
Perfect.
And if we needed to do a mid-year budget review and add something, we could do that, should Chief Hull require more in that category.
And I asked about the poles at one point. I think they don't cost much to put them in, right? To pay somebody to put a pole in?
Oh, come on, the county's going to charge us.
Oh, I know, we'll have to pay for it, certainly.
Well, I can always try to.
I mean, I'm just saying that's a part of the cost.
I got to get clarification. I don't know if the county will put those poles in for us or not. I don't believe they did the last time. So I can't quote you how much it cost the district to place those poles, but it was fairly minimal.
It was like 100 or 200 or something.
The poles were installed by Fernando, and I believe the cost per pole was $150.
Right, okay, good.
Thank you.
Celia.
Celia Conkas. There has been a problem with some very wide trucks that have been parked for a very long time in the same place. And then they have moved, and people have been complaining. They were for a long time on Amherst, and then they've now moved up to Grizzly Peak, just beside the reservoir. And I don't know whether anybody can make any statement about the problem of keeping those vehicles. They should not be where they're blocking traffic. And there seems to be one very large, wide vehicle, and then two on either side, one in the front and one in the back, and there must be 2 inches of space between the cars.
A good question, by the way. As to those trucks, I am in.
This is on Grizzly Peak for folks who may be wondering.
Yeah, they've been moved around town several times, and we've fielded numerous complaints about wherever they've been parked. I'm in the process of right now of looking into the abatement process. It's on my radar. I'm almost to the point to where we can start taking action to try to get this problem resolved. It's been an ongoing problem for the 20 years that I've been here. So, same trucks, same owners, different vehicles throughout time.
Excuse me, Chief Hall, I have to interrupt. This is getting a little bit off the agenda item, so.
Sorry.
We can talk about it offline, or.
Can I just say that if anyone has complaints about this, that they should please direct them to Chief Hull. It's an important part of the process to record these complaints.
Andrew Gutierrez. I just want to give a report from the North Arlington Freeway. The freeway north of Dead Man's Curve, which is roughly where the Andronico's house is really a dangerous place. And in talking to the county, they give summary statistics, but they're summary statistics after they've passed the radar sign. And usually when they're passing the radar sign, the speed is at least 30, so that means they can go to Dead Man's Curve at around 30 miles per hour. Before then, the lights will just be flashing, meaning that they've gone above the threshold for the speed limit there that the machine records. And sometimes it's 40 and 50. There are no crosswalks. There are no lights. So to see people getting off the bus and crossing the street or vice versa, young kids, it's a disaster waiting to happen. I've been complaining about this for about 25 years, and we get more radar signs and we get more abatement. But a very good technique is to give speeding tickets. It raises insurance premiums, and it makes people remember, gee, I got a ticket here. Now, when you look at the records for Kensington, the number of tickets that are given, I guess the word I would use would be ridiculously low, almost non-existing. And I ask why. Chief Hart, when he was around, said that he would solve the problem in other ways. I still haven't figured out what the other way is. So the county views the streets of Kensington as country roads. Okay? And their concern is to expedite traffic. We happen to be like Belgium, the crossroads of the East Bay. And so anybody wanting to get someplace else comes through Kensington, and you can put up as many of these radar signs as you want, but it's not going to solve the problem. It's going to be solved by enforcement and speeding tickets. Thank you.
I think hopefully that will be part of what we're going to do, or what Chief Hull will do, is that along with the signs, there will be more enforcement. Because again, if you just have radar signs and no enforcement, then people will start ignoring them. So, but I think Chief Hull made reference to that, right?
Yeah, now we're going back to one of the hot topics that was discussed here earlier. We have one officer working during the day, and unfortunately, that officer can't be in more than one place at one time. As you've experienced, every time we've had these discussions, you would see a patrol car out there working that area for a certain amount of time, then all of a sudden you don't see a patrol car anymore. Right now, what the officers are doing is they're going to where we have reported hot spots. So once they leave one hot spot to go to another hot spot, then we're getting calls back to that hot spot. The officer has to go back to that hot spot. One of the main way to resolve this issue is we just have to figure out a way to have more bodies. And we just don't have the resources for that right now.
Quick comment. County traffic, in dealing with them, it's a bureaucracy. And their responsibility is only sort of the letter of the law, and it's usually to facilitate what their objectives are. The board, Chief Hall, needs to, how can I say it, lean on the county a bit to get them to be a bit more responsive to the needs of this community. Because right now, we literally are just county roads, nothing more.
Well, we have some directors that are very good at being squeaky wheels, so we're working on.
What are you talking about?
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the purchase of 2 solar-powered fixed radar signs at the cost of $4,000 each, and authorize Chief Hull to have 2 poles placed in a, I don't want to mandate Beloit and Purdue, but that's, I guess, the area that we're looking at. I just want, because it'll require encroachment permits, and I know just some of those plots in front of Purdue might be precious, people might fight, but you can figure out where they best should go, and we'll defer to your judgment.
I think 4,000 is pre-tax, just so you know.
Oh,
Tax not
we're not
included.
paying that tax, no. All right, plus tax, so 4,000, 8,000 plus tax. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes 4-0. That concludes this meeting.
I'll move to adjourn.
All right, I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for attending. We'll have our next regular meeting April 12th.